There, everyone. Buenos dias a todos, and welcome to the Spanish GCSE and iGCSE video tutorial. So, in this tutorial, we are looking at how to answer all of the different types of questions, or all of the most common different question types in the Spanish GCSE or iGCSE listening paper. So, I'm going to take you through these question types one by one, give you the techniques required to be able to answer each of them, and therefore considerably improve your marks in the listening paper as well. So, just to introduce myself first, I'm Dhananjay Talwar, and I studied French and Italian for my MA at the University of Cambridge. I graduated in 2015, and I have been an educator since that time, mainly as a tutor. I've been a full-time tutor for 6 years now, at least actually, and I've helped over 500 students to achieve or even exceed their target grade for GCSE or iGCSE exams in different languages during that time. I have taught around 8 languages to GCSE and iGCSE levels so far, and some of those at higher levels as well. And one thing you need to know is that I'm really passionate about languages, as I'm sure you will be able to tell. I love languages and language learning, something that I really enjoy. And I've learned more than 20 languages to different levels, which include at least 9 to fluency, one of which is Spanish. I equally enjoy motivating my students, giving them methods and techniques for learning languages efficiently, while also having loads of fun and helping them to get to their target grades. These are the Spanish GCSE and iGCSE exam boards. As of August 2025, this should be correct. And yeah, you should recognize your exam board here if you're a student. This particular video does look at the question types that are most common across all of these exam boards for the listening paper, and they're very similar to those found in the reading paper as well. There's considerable overlap in terms of the types of questions that can come up. Although obviously the medium and the format of those two papers, reading and listening, is different in some crucial ways as well. So I've taken the most common question types across all of these exam boards. And so the material in this video should be very useful for all students. Now, before we go through these one by one, I'm just going to show you a quick list of the most common question types to encounter in the listening exam. Of course, this is not a definitive or complete list. One thing is that the format and the syllabus for exam boards does change naturally over time. So definitely worth keeping up to date with that and monitoring, say, the website of your exam board to make sure you're aware of what will come up for you in your listening paper. These certainly are the most common question types, which tend to be seen very often across essentially all of the exam boards too. So I'm going to take you through those one by one. But just to list them for you, they are the gap fill questions, matching up questions, multiple choice type questions, questions asking you to identify the correct statements, questions asking you to answer in English, and questions asking you to provide an answer in Spanish. And there at the bottom, you'll also see in brackets the dictation task. The dictation task is new. As mentioned, exam boards can update their syllabus, their exam formats from time to time. And that's exactly what AQA and Pearson edXL GCSE specifically have done for their language exams for GCSEs from 2026 onwards. And they've included a dictation task in their listening paper. So that is something I handle and go through in more detail in a separate video. Not all students will have to do that. But if you do, if you're doing AQA or Pearson edXL GCSE, then do watch that other video for more guidance. Okay, so we're going to go through these question types one by one, starting with gap fill questions. And for every single question type, I will give an example, which is taken directly from a past paper, give you my tips, how best to go about answering this kind of a question, and show you how to go about it. So gap fill questions are essentially when you are given a series of words. You can see the words that you can choose from in the box here, from A to M, and then a series of statements. The statements are below here from A to F, and you have to complete each of those statements with the correct word from that box. So you have a limited number of options to choose from. And the first thing I would do, this example, by the way, comes from a Pearson edXL iGCSE question, from 2023, the first thing I would do for any question, whether it's in reading or in listening, is read the instructions and make sure that you read over the instructions carefully so that you understand exactly what to do. The next thing for gap fill questions is I would look at every single word in this box. Make sure that you read through them carefully, and that you understand what they all mean as much as possible, because that obviously is key to identifying the answers. Then I would read through each of the statements one by one, and only then would I start to actually answer the question. Similar technique that I would use for each of these questions, for each of these question types in that respect. For gap fill questions, though, I do have a particular technique I really like to use, which is different to what many students would be taught, and that is to use the grammar to help you. So I would use the grammar to narrow down the options first by seeing what could grammatically fit in the gap. And then once I've narrowed down the options, ideally before the audio is even started, I'd try and narrow down the options. Then once the audio starts, I would listen out to see which of those options is the correct one, according to the information provided in the audio. So if we look at A, for example, it says, La casa donde Alberto vive ahora es something, which means the house where Alberto now lives is something. We obviously need to fill the gap. And we know that the word that goes into that gap grammatically, it must agree with la casa. It's very likely to be an adjective, and it's very likely to be an adjective in the feminine singular form, because it must agree, it's very likely to have to agree with la casa, which is a feminine singular noun. Using that, we can eliminate options that are not adjectives in the feminine singular, which narrows down the options considerably. In fact, we would only be left with a few options, B, G, I, and L. And out of those, we can see that actually only two of them, I or L, would make sense when you're describing a house. You wouldn't describe a house really as coastal or mountainous. So you know already, before the audio has even started, ideally, you've already whittled it down to just two possible answers. And then, of course, you'd use the information in the audio, listening out carefully to that to identify the correct answer from those two. Watch out as well for trick questions and pay attention to the details. Even if you've identified the answer must be either I, moderna, or L, antigua, they will often try and trick you by mentioning both of those things, for instance, in the audio. So you do need to listen out to the details and make sure just not to write down the first thing that you hear, even after narrowing down the options. So that is how I would approach gap fill questions. Use the grammar first. The grammar can really help to guide you, and then use the audio to decide which of your remaining options is correct. Yeah, you can see there that for A, moderna or antigua would be our only realistic options, grammar-wise. And then you'd have to identify the answer according to the audio. The next question type is matching up questions. This comes from a Pearson edXL GCSE paper of 2020. You can see the instructions written out at the top, of course. Read through those carefully as always. And for matching up questions, you're given a series of names. Usually there will be names. Here we've got Alba, Pablo, Amparo, and Juan. And you're also given a series of statements. You can see the statements here from A to E, and you have to match the name with the correct statement. So just to read through these instructions quickly too, it says, these people are looking for new friendships on the radio. What does each one of them want? Choose between Alba, Pablo, Amparo, and Juan. You can use the names more than once. So that is also an important detail, that you can repeat the same name in more than one answer. Important to make a note of that, to be aware of it. And that's why you need to read the instructions with care as well. For these, trick questions are quite common. So try not to write down the first name that you hear. If we look at A, for example, it says, busca gente para tocar música, meaning this person is looking for people to play music. It would be quite common to hear something in the audio that might indicate, say, that Alba, for example, plays an instrument. So many students would be tempted to write Alba as the answer there, but then you might get another important piece of information later in the audio that contradicts that, or that indicates somebody else is a much more suitable answer. For example, we may find out that Juan actually is directly looking for somebody to play music with, which indicates that Juan is a better answer for A, and Alba, even though she likes music or plays an instrument, is not actually actively looking for people to do that with. Those kinds of trick questions are very common, so you do need to listen out to the details and be careful not to write down just the first name you hear that appears to be connected to a particular statement. Okay, so those are matching up questions. Trick questions are very common, particularly as you get towards the end of the listening or even reading paper, and that's something to really watch out for. Multiple choice questions are really common, something that comes up a lot. This particular one comes from the 2023 paper for AQA. You can see the instructions written out in English here. Multiple choice questions are simply where you've got a certain number of options to choose from. It is often 3 options exactly, but not necessarily. You may have more options than that, or you may have fewer options to choose from. And usually for these kinds of multiple choice questions, you'd have to select just one answer as the correct one out of all the options, but do pay attention to the instructions because that could possibly vary as well. You may have to select 2 correct answers, for instance, or something else. The way I would go about these is there is a very useful and key technique, which is elimination. Elimination means ruling out answers or discarding answers that you know are wrong. And that can be really useful because obviously for multiple choice type questions, you've got limited options to choose from. Often there will just be 3 options that you can choose from. And that means that even if you have a random guess, you've still got a reasonably good chance of guessing the correct answer, even randomly. And even if you're not sure what the right answer is, if you've discarded answers that you know to be wrong, then that increases your chances of guessing the correct answer out of the remaining options. So it can really help you to get closer to identifying the right answer. Another thing I would really do is read through the question and answer options carefully. Ideally, in your listening, I would do that before the audio for that question has even started, if you can. Make sure that you read through the question, each one of them, and the options for every question too, and make sure that you understand what all of those options mean as much as possible. That gives you a great idea for what to listen out to when the audio actually starts. So that you're not doing it from scratch. And you've got a great idea of what you can actually select as the answer. Again, be careful not to write down the first thing that you hear. It's really common for multiple choice questions for them to try to trick you by mentioning all of the options in some way, shape, or form. So you do have to pay attention to the details as well. Okay, the next question type is called Identify the Correct Statements questions. This is taken from sample material for Pearson Edexcel GCSE. Again, you've got the instructions given in English. Identifying the correct statements, those questions are fairly similar to multiple choice questions in that you'll be given a series of statements or items, which here are shown from A to G, and you'll have to select which one of those are correct according to the information given in the audio. The number of statements or items that you're given in the question can vary. Here we have 7, but that's not always necessarily going to be the case. It can be more or less. And the number of items that you have to select or the number of statements that you have to select as correct can also vary. So here it says, listen to the recording and put a cross in each one of the 3 correct boxes. So you've got to select 3 correct statements out of 7, but that can vary. So you may be asked to select 4 correct statements or 5, for instance. So it's very careful to read through the instructions with care as well for that reason. The first thing I would do is read through the instructions and then read through all of the options, particularly if they're written in Spanish. you need to make sure you understand what those options mean, so you've got an idea of what to listen out for once the audio starts. Again, you've got a limited number of options to choose from, so even if you're not sure which statements are the correct ones, you can eliminate wrong statements and therefore hugely increase your chances of getting the answers correct too. For instance, even if you know that the answer is not, if you know the answer is not A, more towels, you could mentally eliminate that, or even put a small cross or some sign on the exam paper, just as a sign to yourself that that answer is mentally eliminated. As long as you don't make it confusing for the examiner by making them think that you are indicating that as the right answer. So be careful not to do that. And that can then increase your chances of getting the right answers, even if you're not sure exactly what the 3 correct answers are straight away. Again, watch out for trick questions. Make sure to pay attention to the details. Even if you have to identify 3 correct answers out of 7, you're very likely to hear details or some information relating to more than 3 of the statements in the list. Okay, the next type of question is where you've got to answer in English. So this one comes from a 2023 paper for AQA. You can see the instructions themselves written out in English at the top. Here, in these questions, you are, of course, asked to answer in English. So this is essentially listening comprehension, where you have to provide the answers in English. For these questions, you should not find yourself writing out extended answers. If it's anything longer than, say, a sentence or so, then you're probably providing more information than is needed. Although you should pay attention to the number of marks available for every question too, because that gives you a really good indication as to how much information or how many details you need to give. Generally, there will not be more than 2 marks available per question, though. Of course, you give the answers in English here. If there's any doubt about which question you answer in, then you can simply follow the rule that you always answer in the same language that the question is written in. But there shouldn't really be any cause for doubt, as the question paper should indicate to you very clearly what language to use when answering. For these questions, again, you have to remember the answer is in the audio. So use the audio to help you absolutely as much as possible. And in the listening, this largely comes down to identifying where in the audio the answer lies. Once you've identified that, or once you know where the answer comes within the audio, you simply have to translate that part of the audio, which of course would be in Spanish, into English. So use the audio to help you as much as possible. It can be harder perhaps to translate the appropriate part in the listening exam because you can't see the words written out in Spanish. So I would definitely try and practice things like sound symbol correspondences and transcribing what you hear, essentially, or understanding what you hear from a Spanish audio. Try and give only as much detail and information as is required as well. You'll see that each of these questions, for instance, are 1 mark, which means you generally need to give just 1 piece of information. So for each of these questions, I would not give 2 pieces of information or more. I'd stick to just 1. If you give extra pieces of info and there's a mistake in the extra parts that you've written, then you risk being penalized and, in fact, losing all of the marks. Okay, our last question type is where you've got to answer in Spanish. So this one comes from a 2022 paper for AQA, and like the questions requiring answers in English, answering in Spanish is very similar. Here you can see the instructions written in Spanish, which say a trip to Ronda. You're listening to a conversation between a family and the employee of a travel agency. Complete the sentences in Spanish. So again, pay attention to the number of marks available. These questions are worth 2 marks each, which mean that you need to provide 2 pieces of information, as you can see from the numbering in any case. So it is important to be careful about that. Again, though, for answering in Spanish, these are listening comprehension questions in Spanish. The trick is to use the audio to help you as much as possible. This normally comes down to identifying or finding exactly where the answer is in that audio, and then you simply have to transcribe. Here, you don't have to translate because the audio itself will be in Spanish anyways, but you have to transcribe or write down the correct part of the audio where the answer lies. Try and use the audio to help you as much as you can. A lot of the time, you'll be able to write down exactly what you hear in the audio. Sometimes you will have to change small parts so that it makes good sense, so that your answer makes sense in Spanish. You may have to change, say, pronouns, for example. If the person in the audio is speaking in the first person using the I form, you'd usually have to change that to he or she or it when you're writing your answer. Otherwise, it wouldn't really make sense. And you may well likewise have to change things like verb forms too. But the trick is to use the audio again to help you as much as possible. You generally do not have to write full sentences either when you're answering in Spanish or in English. Okay, now we're going to go through a quick quiz to test how well you understood how to answer these different types of Spanish GCSE and iGCSE listening questions. Question number 1. What is the technique of elimination? Definitely something I mentioned a few times in there. So I'll give you a few seconds before showing you what it is. Okay, here it goes. So elimination means eliminating answers that you know are incorrect. And if you're given various different options to choose from, whether it's a 2 or 10, this can be very useful to get you closer to the right answer. It means that even if you have a random guess out of the remaining options, you've still got a higher chance, of course, of guessing it correctly. Number 2, true or false. You'll hear each question in the listening exam exactly twice. Interesting question. What do you think? Let me show the answer then. This one is true. Try to make the most of this as much as you can. The only exception actually to this is the dictation task, which is only there for AQA and Pearson EdXL GCSE exam boards from 2026 onwards. And everything in the dictation task you would hear exactly 3 times. Question number 3 is true or false. You should always answer the questions in the listening exam in Spanish. Is that one true? Is that one false? Let me show you then. This one is false. It depends on the question, really. Many questions will not require you to write out an answer at all in English or in Spanish. Most of them tend to be multiple choice or come down to ticking the correct box, for instance. If you do have to write out an answer, you will always write it in the same language that the question is written in. So if you're in any doubt, you can follow that rule, although the instructions in the exam paper should make it very clear which language to use. You sometimes do have to answer in Spanish, particularly towards the end of the listening paper, and you can get questions requiring you to answer in English, but certainly not for every question. And number 4, how can you use the grammar to help you if you're answering gap fill type questions? That gap fill questions were the first questions that I went through. Did you manage to take that in? Let me give you a few seconds before I reveal the answer again. Okay, here we go. So grammar can really help to eliminate options that would not fit grammatically in the gap. I should say that it does vary slightly depending on the type of gap fill question, but it is often the case that grammar can help you to narrow down your options. Using that, if it works for that gap fill type of question, you can considerably narrow down the options to choose from, but it does depend on the exact type of gap fill question. It doesn't necessarily work for every single one of them. If you have questions about any of this material, or if you'd like to know more about more personalized help, which I do offer too, you can get in touch by email, through Facebook or Instagram. I do post every day on Facebook, Instagram, and even LinkedIn, sharing my love of languages with people, hopefully inspiring more and more to learn languages like me, as I have to. And also a lot about GCSE and iGCSE language exams. So helping students to revise, making sure you know how to revise and how to go into the exam feeling as confident as possible. So well worth following me on each of those platforms. I do have many resources, including free resources available for Spanish, GCSE and iGCSE and other languages. And I do one-to-one classes, group classes, courses, and more. So if you'd like to know more about any of this, just reach out.